Hi kids, this is the Photoshop Workbench. I'm Mark Johnson. Thanks for joining me. When I encounter software with a name as alluring as Flame Painter, I have no choice but to investigate. After experimenting with the trial version for several hours, I immediately purchased the $90 professional version and can't wait to discover creative ways to incorporate Flame Painter's ribbon and flame effects into my compositing workflow. In today's workbench, we'll explore a method for blending prismatic flowing ribbons created with Flame Painter into a composite of a leaping dancer. So as you can see here, I have a composite that I created in Photoshop of this leaping dancer. And I want to create flowing prismatic ribbons that sort of mimic the energy of the dancer and the curves of the hills that you see right here. Since this workbench is not about the process of creating a composite, I've already created the dancer here on a separate layer from the background, and I've created the shadows that you see right down here. So this is really about using Flame Painter and then incorporating what you do in Flame Painter into Photoshop. So we're going to take this image right here over into Flame Painter. So let's pop over to Flame Painter. But before I bring that in, I just want to give you a 1-minute demo of how Flame Painter works. Now, keep in mind, I'm new to this. I've only explored it for about 4 or 5 hours at this point, and I have a lot to learn, and that it's really exciting to me because I see this program as something with great potential for anybody who enjoys painting, anybody who is a photo compositor, anybody who is a designer. You're going to love this software. And I'm actually working on trying to arrange an affiliate discount for my audience. So I will let you know in the text associated with this workbench if I'm able to arrange that before the workbench actually posts to my site. So here I am in Flame Painter. You can see over here on the right hand side, these are the brushes. A lot of very creative, fun brushes in here. I'll show you just a couple that I love an awful lot. Here's the flame brush. I can go ahead and click on that. I'm going to leave it set to its defaults. There's already a new layer created down here. You want to work with layers in Flame Painter the same way you work with layers in Photoshop. So this button here allows you to create a new layer, and then this one right here allows you to add a vector layer, which I'll talk about in a moment. So I already have a new layer here. I'm going to go ahead and pop in here. Notice how my brush gets more excited when I move around rapidly. When it's more excited and I start to paint, I get a much more wild flow to things. If it's mellowed out like this, I get something like that. So you can really decide, do you want to get something that's got a lot of flow to it? I'm just doing numbers here. Or do you want something that's kind of calmed down? And that's based upon leaving your brush still to let it calm down and give you this look. Or it's based on letting things get really wild here, kind of moving your brush around before you actually press down, and then getting something like that. So you can see, I mean, if I get this really excited, I can fill this screen with something absolutely beautiful. And that's just working with the default flame brush. And we have another one here called a feather brush. Let's take a look at this. Again, if I let it calm down, I get a look like that. If I let it go wild, I start to get a look like this. But there's something else I can do with this. I can change the type of feather brush from flame to ribbon. And when I do that and I start to move around, I get these beautiful ribbon effects that you see forming right before your eyes here. So a lot of possibility, both in terms of the brushes you use and the flame versus ribbon type of brush that you work with over here. Plus you've got a whole spectrum of colors that you can work with right here. So I'm going to throw away this layer just by tapping the minus symbol right here. And I'm going to go ahead and open up my composite file into Flame Painter so I can add the ribbon effects. So I'll choose File, Open, and it's asking if I want to save changes to that last document. No. And I'm going to locate my layered PSD. This is a Photoshop document I'm opening into Flame Painter. Alright? Now, as I was learning to use Flame Painter, I discovered that if I have the same document open here as I have open in Photoshop, and I save here Or in Photoshop, it overwrites what's in the other place. So by default now, I'm choosing File, Save As. I'll go ahead and give this the exact same name it has, whatever that may be. And I'm just going to append it with FP, Flame Painter. And I'll make sure that I save this as a Photoshop image, a PSD. Okay? Now I'm working on a document that's independent of the Photoshop document that was open in Photoshop a moment ago. So it's two separate documents. That's going to keep me from overwriting anything inadvertently. All right, now our goal here is just to create a ribbon effect. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to work with this feather brush that you see right here, and we're going to work with it in ribbon mode, and we're going to work with an existing gradient here, this gold gradient that you see right here. Okay, we're going to work with those, and I want to work with this since I'm only going to be creating one ribbon and then reproducing it in Photoshop. I am going to work with this as a vector layer. So here's the upside of working with a vector layer. And by the way, right here is how you add a new vector layer. So this is a new pixel-based layer, a raster layer, and this icon right here is a new vector layer. So I'm going to click on that. I've got a vector layer here. Upside of a vector layer, you can edit the shape of the vector layer, the opacity, the size, the span, all of the characteristics of that vector layer after the fact. Plus, you can do a high-res render to get a really beautiful effect when you're working with a vector layer. Downside of a vector layer is you can only apply one paint stroke to it. So if I were going to be doing lots and lots of paint strokes, I'd probably be working with just a regular layer here. But in this case, I want to work with a vector layer because I'm only going to apply one ribbon and then I'm going to reproduce that in Photoshop. Alright, so again, I have the feather brush, I have the ribbon option selected, I've gone to the gold gradient here, and I have a vector layer that I produced by clicking right here. Now I'm going to shrink this down just a little bit. Notice how when you're working with the ribbon, you get this thing that sort of follows you. This takes a lot of getting used to. In fact, I'm not even remotely used to it yet. I'm still working it out. But what I want to do here is try to create a ribbon effect. And I'll probably have to try this a few times. Notice how by shrinking down the canvas, I can start outside of it and then I can flow into it. So I'm going to come up here and flow in to my image like that. Now, that's looking pretty good. I could always do Command or Control Z and undo it, and I could try something else. But keep in mind, on a vector layer, I can alter some of the characteristics after the fact. So I'm going to go up through here, something like that. And that's going to work just great right there. Okay? Let's zoom this up a little bit larger. Let's go all the way up to here. And I want to show you how you can edit the characteristics of this ribbon effect because we're working on a vector layer. So what you can do here is come up to this icon, which is Edit Vector Layer. Alright, click on that. And then you can come over here to this button which allows you to change the characteristics. It's called the Paint tool, but really it's allowing us to change the characteristics of that existing vector or that existing ribbon. So I can come down here and I can play around with, say, opacity. Let's start there. We're at 39 right now. Let me crank it way up so you can see. It's made it much more opaque by cranking that up. I don't want it quite that opaque, so let's back it down a little. That's looking good. Now I can play around with the size of it. And size doesn't do exactly what I would expect it to do. I've tried. Some of these are difficult for me to figure out, and so I'm still in the process of doing that. Play around with the span of it, and that makes some changes in there that I kind of like. I'll back it down a little bit more and see what I get. I like increasing the span of that ribbon. I think that's kind of like the width. Then I can come down to these. These are really interesting. I'm not going to go through all of these right now, but there's one here. I think it's center. Let me try center and see what happens. So see how center really creates a lot more chaos there. I'm going to back this down until I can find something I like, and maybe there won't be. Oh man, that is a gorgeous ribbon effect. It's not going to work with this dancer very well, but it's stunning. I love this. All right, so center isn't going to work here. I'm going to work with this one right there. I thought maybe if I went to a low number like 1, I'd get something that would work, but it's just not working. So let me back it down. you can see there is definite experimentation to be done here. Let me just try focus real quickly and see. Yeah, so focus gets it pretty chaotic. I don't know really how to describe that differently than center because I just don't have the language yet. And that's something I will be developing as I play around with this more. And then chaos actually doesn't create as much chaos as center or focus. So you got to kind of play around with those. Let me go to detail and crank that up. Give me a little more detail in there. All right, so I think we're looking pretty good at this point. We definitely have something that we can work with. Once you have something that you can work with in Photoshop, you can actually render this out. Let's go to 100% so you can see this ribbon. Okay, you can actually render it out so that it looks even better than what we have right here. So I'm going to choose Layer and High Res Render. All right, and you can control the level of detail. I'm just going to go with 1 right now. That'll render very quickly, and you'll see that that cleans up the ribbon a bit. All right, just by doing a quick high-res render. Certainly try the higher settings on that and see if you get results that you like. You're going to have to play around. You have to have patience, but I think you're going to enjoy the process as you work with it. So now I want to save this file for the last time. So I already did a save as earlier, so I'm just doing File, Save. And it's asking me where I want to save it. Do I want it to be a PSD? Yes, same spot. I want it to be a PSD. When I hit save, it's going to ask, do you want to replace the original one? Strange that it does that, but that's fine. I want to replace the original one. Not the original composite file, but the original composite with the appended with FP. So this is my Flame Painter, my FP one that I've just replaced. Now, I don't see a close here in Flame Painter. I want to make sure I close this before I go back over to Photoshop. I don't see a close. Somebody can hopefully enlighten me about that. So I've just been choosing Quit Flame Painter. And then it's saying, do you want to save changes? Well, we just did, but it's asking if we want to save in a Flame Painter format. We're fine with a PSD. That's going to allow us to work with the layers in Photoshop. So no, I don't want to save. Now we'll come back over to Photoshop. Let's get rid of this one right now. I want to pop into Bridge. And you'll see here, so this was my original composite file with the 2 layers in it. This is what I'm hoping for, something kind of like that when it's all said and done. And here's the one that just came out of Flame Painter. It's appended with FP. So I want to open this in Photoshop, which means coming out of Bridge or Lightroom for that matter. I can just double click and here it is. Okay? So now I want to take this ribbon, which is on its own layer, beautifully on its own layer. I love that. Comes back into Photoshop layered. And by the way, there is a feature called Connect associated with Flame Painter that allows you to exchange layers between Photoshop and Flame Painter and vice versa. If you're working with just a single layer like I've done here, that feature is going to be great. If you're working with a multi-layered file, where you create 6 or 7 or 8 different ribbon or flame layers, I think the method we've used right here is going to make a lot more sense. So just one layer like this you could use Connect, but I don't have time to go into that today. So what I'm going to do here is work with this ribbon, and I want to make it look like it's sort of wrapped around her torso and then just extending behind her. So I'll start by using the Move tool there, and I'll move it up into a position that I like, maybe right here. There we go. And then I want to eliminate it from this area out in front of her. So I can do that if I hold down. You'll notice she's on her own layer. Or if she was here with a mask, that would work too. I want to hold down Command on the Mac or Control on the PC and click on her thumbnail to load up her selection right here. Okay. Now if I choose Select Inverse, actually hold on one sec, let me deselect. Let me add a mask first. Okay, so I'm going to add a mask to this layer by clicking on that front-loading washing machine. Now I'm going to Command or Control click here. So mask first, then Command or Control click. Then choose Select Inverse. And now I have this area right out here selected. So if I grab the brush tool and set black as the foreground, go with a soft edge brush, 100% opacity and flow, I can paint that ribbon away from this area. And notice how I can bump into her body and it won't go away from her because that area is not selected. So I'm just going to paint out here. And I'm going to go bigger, higher, lower than I did a minute ago, and you'll see why in just a sec. Since I'm going to be duplicating this ribbon and moving it around, I want to make sure this whole area out here is painted. Something kind of like that. Let's just paint up here as well. There we go. Something like that. Alright, and I was Option or Alt clicking the mask to get to that. Now I can choose Select, Deselect, and now I have the look I want. Okay. The other thing I could do if I wanted her hair to come in front of this, I could Command or Control click here. I'm still working on this mask. I can go into this, go to the brush. Let's see here. Can't see my brush. Sometimes this happens. Interesting. Swap my colors. Alright, let me hide Photoshop for a sec. I've encountered this a few times before where I kind of have to hide Photoshop and come back to it. It's a little bit of a bug. But there we go. So actually I don't want to swap my colors. I want to paint with black. There we go. So you can see if I paint right there with black, now her hair is in front of the ribbon. Let's again choose Select, Deselect, or Command or Control D. Her hair is in front of the ribbon if you want that look. I'm not sure I do, so I'm going to go back to the way it was. Alright, now I'm going to take this ribbon layer and I want to duplicate it. So I'm going to hold down Option on the Mac or Alt on the PC and click and drag it up until I see that line and then let go and it will duplicate it. So Option on Mac, Alt on PC, drag up till you see that line, let go, and it will duplicate it. You could also use Command or Control J and that would work great. Now on this particular layer, I want to move it, but I want to move the ribbon without moving the mask simultaneously. So I'm going to unlink the ribbon from the mask by clicking on that chain link that was there, grab the Move tool, and then I'm going to move this around like that. Now I could also transform it. I could choose Edit, Free Transform, and I could hover over an area just outside a corner here and I could create a little bit of rotation like that. Tap Return or Enter. You can see it's in front of the leg right now, which means I need to go to the mask for that layer, activate the brush tool, make sure I'm painting with black. I need to eliminate it from right here. There we go. Alright, that's why I painted extra black out here to avoid that, but it didn't happen in that spot. Now I'll go to this layer. I want this to be a different color ribbon. So I'm going to go into the Adjustments panel, which you can find under the Window menu listed alphabetically. Hold down Option or Alt and click on the Hue Saturation adjustment layer. And then use the previous layer to create clipping mask. This will clip this color changing hue saturation layer into the duplicate ribbon layer. And I can move the hue slider here until I get a ribbon that is a color that I like. I might go with something like kind of a springy green in this instance. I could also play around with saturation if I wanted to do that. Now I'm going to go back to this layer, activate it, and shift click on the hue saturation layer above it, and while holding Option or Alt, drag this up until I see that little line and let go, and it makes a duplicate of that. Now I can grab this ribbon, so I'm activating the ribbon part of this layer, and I can use the Move tool. I just tap V to get to it very quickly, and I can drag this around to maybe here. And again, I could transform it with Command or Control T, and I could rotate that around a little bit if I wanted. Kind of do whatever you want in terms of, I could even stretch it out a little bit so you can make them look a little bit different. I can reposition it. Maybe I want something like that for this one. I don't know. Tap Return or Enter. There we go. And is it showing up in front of her hair? No, it's doing fine. I thought it was showing up there, but it's not. Now I can colorize this one. Since I duplicated the hue saturation layer that's clipped already, I can just go to this layer right here, double click on that icon, and I can play around with the color of that one. And you know what? I can play with all sorts of colors. Let's go with that beautiful turquoise that we have right there. And we'll do this one more time. So click on this layer, shift click here, Option or Alt drag up to duplicate it. Take this ribbon, activate the Move tool, drag it around, see what happens. I'm going to transform it, Command or Control T, reposition it into here perhaps, tap Return or Enter, and then double click on this icon for the hue saturation layer, And in this case, let's go with another. I think we're going to go with, just because of the color palette in this scene, I tend to like another golden ribbon. Maybe something right in there. So now what we've done is we've taken the composite where we had just this background with the girl, and she's on her own layer there, and we've added in this beautiful flowing ribbon effect with different colored ribbons based on elements that we created in Flame Painter. So you can see how beautiful those elements are right there. And imagine the possibilities. Here I'm working with these ribbons, and when you're in Flame Painter, you can work with ribbons of all different colors. You can work with flames of all different colors. And when you try out the brushes in there, you're going to find a lot of other options. As I discover new techniques that include using Flame Painter and Photoshop in combination, I'll record some more workbenches about them. But for now, I think that's great. I appreciate you being with me on today's Photoshop workbench, and I wish you a wonderful day. Take care.